Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome back to the Minnesota Sports Podcast. And congratulations, your Minnesota Vikings are the worst 14-win team in the history of the NFL. I don't even need to look up anything to be able to definitively say that. Every single time that I think that the Vikings can't get more disappointing, it's unbelievable. Like, I was worried we would lose this game, and yet here I sit, and this was a blowout. Like, not only are we the first 14-win team to not make the divisional round, as far as I remember, this was the biggest blowout of the entire week. We let a 10-7 team come in and absolutely destroy us. Like, we had no answer all game long, and I'm actually recording this like after the first drive and a half of the third quarter. I actually started recording directly after, on a 3rd and long, Cooper Kupp just randomly snagged a pass that should have been probably intercepted, and now I just turned it off, so I don't even know what's going on, and I don't really care what's going on. My thought was, hey, if we can beat the Rams, then it's kind of, we're playing with house money here. We won a playoff game. We're going up against a really tough Philadelphia team. But not even that. Like, on the bright side, if this, we were hoping this game would at least answer any questions we had about Sam Darnold, get his butt off the team right now. Like, he had an amazing season, and he proved a lot of people wrong in the regular season, went from being horrible on multiple different teams to at one point being in the MVP conversation, but that doesn't matter because the lights were the brightest the last 2 games of the season. We went in there with a chance to get the number 1 seed versus the Lions, and he absolutely crapped the bed and had his worst performance of the season. Then we go into the wild card game, and he looked exactly like the Sam Darnold we were used to seeing the entire rest of his career. And as far as I'm concerned, that's all I need to know for him to get the boot. And let's try things with J.J. McCarthy, have Daniel Jones be our backup, and just see what happens, because I'm done with this. It's just so frustrating because, he was amazing all year. As soon as it matters, snap of the fingers. The entire team, with the snap of a finger, just completely stopped playing the football that they've played all season long just because it was the playoffs. It's just like, it's this gene that gets injected into the Vikings, where the second you become a Minnesota Viking, you can no longer win when it counts. It's unbelievable. Like, even when players were making plays, the universe was against us. How that punt didn't get blocked in the second quarter is beyond me. Like, even when we are playing good football, we're not playing good football. The offensive line was absolutely atrocious. Obviously, we already talked about Sam Darnold. It's unbelievable how you can get sacked as many times as he gets sacked because he held on to the football too long, and he still holds on to the football too long. Doesn't it hurt to get sacked? Wouldn't it make sense? I understand if you're throwing the ball for an interception instead of throwing it away, or throwing an interception instead of getting sacked. Like, that's the opposite of it, because you're worried about getting hit and you get rid of the ball and do something stupid. How can you be stupid enough to understand that getting hit is the reason why your team's losing, and yet you still decide to get hit, even though that also hurts you? Like, absolutely idiotic. Back to the offensive line, worst game they've played all season long. Sean McVay saw the Lions game and said, we can just rush 5 against these guys every single time, and we win. And that's what happened. The offensive line knew that the Rams were going to rush every single time, and they knew that, and they just didn't stop them. It's just as simple as that. 2 seconds for the quarterback to throw the football every single time. Now, again, he should have gotten rid of the football more often, but it really wouldn't have been to anybody because no time to throw. Obviously, Sam Darnold missed a couple wide open throws, and he, again, was atrocious in this game. But, it's frustrating that, we pretty much have had a horrible offensive line for the entire however many years I've been a fan since I was a kid. And we've now had 3 or 4 now different head coaches since I've started becoming a fan. and the offensive line is still trash to this day. Like, how many more seasons do we have to go before we fix the offensive line? We better fix it this year because now we have the money to spend, unless we do something idiotic and franchise tag Sam Darnold. But we should have the money to actually get a decent couple of guards, and maybe we'll even draft someone on the other side because O'Neal's definitely getting up there in age and is probably going to retire soon. The defense had a couple of good stands there. I'm not going to fault them because, 24-3 when I turned the game off, and one of those was a scoop and score. Another one was the Vikings giving it up on a 4th and 2 and giving it back to the Rams in field goal range. So, like, the defense didn't do horrible, but they still did pretty bad. It just felt like every time the Rams needed it, they got it, and every time the Vikings needed it, they got sacked for 15 yards, and that's the way the game went. And it's just really frustrating because, like, it's funny because Kevin O'Connell made that speech where he said, I love that no one's talking about the Vikings. And it was a way of trying to hype up his players, but what he really meant by that is, I'm glad no one's talking about us because the only time we do well as a team is when the lights aren't on us and when no one's paying attention to us. This is a Vikings team that flies under the radar, and when no one's looking at them, when they're able to silently play well, they do well. But as soon as people start talking about the Vikings maybe being good, no. And congratulations to every single person who went into these playoffs saying that the Vikings were frauds, because you are 100% correct. And I didn't want to believe that it was true, but why wouldn't it be true? Every single year, it's the exact same story. So the 14-3 Minnesota Vikings that had a shot to be the 1 seed going into the playoffs and losing that game, they were one good game against the Lions from not even playing in this round. They had such a good record, and they fall to 14-3, and again become the worst probably the worst 14-win team in the history of this league. That was the same record we were. Actually, no, we were one win better when the Gary Anderson thing happened. But it just, it's as bad of a choke as the Cowboys against the Packers last year. And honestly, I would argue that, it sucks to say the Vikings had a worse history than the Dallas Cowboys, because we the last 20, 30 years we've had the same level of playoff success as them, and yet they still have all those Super Bowls back in the 80s or 90s. And we don't even have that. So, pretty hard to say that any, sports franchise has it worse than Minnesota sports. The Minnesota Twins aren't going to be good this year because we're not spending any money. Hopefully we finally sell the team, but with our luck, the poll ads will just sell it to another like-minded, ownership group who's just going to do nothing with the team again. The Wolves came into this year having championship aspirations, and they're playing like absolute crap. And the Wild are a top 2 or 3 team in the league this year, and they're just going to lose to the Stars again in the playoffs. We know it's true. So, great being a Vikings fan, great being a Minnesota sports fan. It's just constant frustration. When your team is bad, you expect them to be bad. When your team is good, they're going to lose anyway. And that's just the way things go for Vikings fans. And we knew this was going to happen. We're hoping that it would happen maybe 1 week later. That being said, this team was supposed to win 5 or 6 games this year, and we were able to put up impressive numbers in the regular season. It just doesn't feel like it matters because we end up not making the divisional round. We ended up with the same amount of playoff wins as we were expected to this year, which was 0. And guess what? Now we have a middle to late round pick instead of having a top 10 pick again. And you see teams like the Commanders and the Texans draft a quarterback in the first few picks of the draft and have no problem immediately going to the playoffs. The Texans and the Commanders now instantly each with more wins in the playoffs the last 5 years than the Vikings have had after getting lucky with their draft pick. And we'll see if J.J. McCarthy pans out, but in typical Vikings fashion, he already has a career-altering knee injury that he has to work through now. So it's just great. It's awesome. So Vikings lose. I don't even know the final score because, again, I'm recording this probably towards the middle of the third quarter at this point. But now the Rams are going to go and play the Eagles, and now we get to have the Lions versus the Eagles most likely in the NFC Championship game, the two fan bases that deserve this the least, which is just horrible. But just like, it hurts because I loved this team. like the team ends up being frustrating in the end, but the people on this team, like the way they had so much fun all season long, the way that they played together as a team and were able to be successful, the way they rallied together to try and play for Kyrie, it sucks because this was such a fun team. But I guess fun doesn't win championships. So we'll have to look at next year. We're going to have a lot more cap space to spend now that Kirk's money is all off the table. And hopefully we don't spend half that money on Darnold, but even if we do, we'll have to see what happens down the road. But, man, it just hurts. But let me know in the comments what you think about this game. Air out all your grievances. At the end of the day, the sun's going to come up tomorrow and we're going to go back to our lives, and it's not going to be that big a deal like it's sports. But, yeah, so have a great rest of your night. Hopefully it goes better than the night's gone so far. And I'll see you on the flip side.